Um, your last question made me think about my recent trip to Bor. But let me first go to the question from the question on the issue of women and the harassment that women face. And I'm happy that you raised it because maybe if I hadn't talked about it, if I hadn't talked about the issue of sexual exploitation and abuse, you wouldn't have thought about that question. So I'm happy I raised it, and I'm happy you thought about that question because it's a very important issue to discuss. First and foremost is the fact that in this crisis, in crises like what we have in South Sudan, there's a separate crisis that happens. We call it a shadow crisis. It's the crisis of women and girls who are disproportionately affected. So they suffer what everybody else is suffering. Then in addition to that, they suffer sexual harassment, they suffer sexual exploitation, they suffer gender-based violence, they suffer conflict-related sexual violence. Everything is dumped on them. And I want to take a moment to talk about women and girls. When I was going to Canal Town on the River Nile, I was looking at one town before we got to Canal. And I turned to the left and I saw that town and I saw a scenario. I saw 4 or 5 men. They had some bags of charcoal. And then they called this girl. She was between the ages of 11 and 15. These big men. And they now were telling her to take this charcoal and carry it. And I was saying to myself, how can these men feel good about themselves? That they're all standing here, able-bodied men, and they feel that this girl should carry all this charcoal. I had tears in my eyes to think about the perception as it relates to gender and how women and girls are seen. Women and girls are the backbone of any society. They are expected to cook. They are expected to nurture. They are expected to clean. They are expected to be partners to men. They are expected to farm. They are expected to harvest. They are expected to birth and go through the 9 months of painful pregnancy and painful delivery. Everything is expected of women and girls. Then you rape them. Then you abuse them. You treat them like horses and like donkeys. It's unacceptable. Women and girls, if educated, you can imagine how far your country will go. Women and girls are your treasure. They are your gems. They are your value. Please value them. And linked to that then is the issue of what women face in trying to access services, what women face in the workplace. It is wrong and it's not accepted. We have a zero tolerance policy in the UN as it relates to sexual exploitation and abuse. And since I joined, one of my priorities has been strengthening our work on preventing sexual exploitation and abuse. We've strengthened our task force, we've strengthened our community-based reporting mechanisms, but you said something here that's very important. And it's the cultural and social norms related to this abuse. Because culturally, it's expected you will solve it the family way. It's expected you will do it under the table and nobody will know. It's expected that that woman should just bear that pain and in fact marry the person who has abused her. That is wrong. That is inappropriate. And we're talking about the issue of attack on humanitarians and having a deterrent. We need deterrents for sexual exploitation and abuse. Stop covering it up by marrying your daughters to men who rape. Men who rape, men who abuse, men who violate. They will continue to do that to your daughters when they're in their houses. So marrying them off doesn't solve the problem. You continue to feed the beast. Because anybody who rapes a woman, attacks a woman, violates a woman, is a beast. It's beastful behavior. It's not humane behavior. And if you give your daughters to them, you are giving your daughters to be abused for the rest of their lives. That's my first message. The second message in relation to that is the issue of the workplace and then also the issue of reporting. When the cases are reported, each agency they have their own investigation units. When the cases are reported officially, they go through a complete mechanism. They are registered in the investigative bodies of the accused entity, takes up the investigation. There's also, what we have is victims assistance. And we have victim assistance officer who provides assistance to the victim when the case is reported. And that's why reporting is important. Reporting is important because there is assistance for victims. And there's a range of assistance and assistance package that's provided for victims. So we do not take it lightly. The case is investigated and action is taken when the case is concluded. It's not, the people who are here in the country do not participate in the investigation. The investigation is done independently, and that's why it takes time. because it's done independently to avoid any kind of manipulation and so forth. And I, as resident of the UN Development System, am responsible to report to the Secretary General every year the status of our actions on preventing sexual exploitation and abuse. This year, in December, I'll be sending him a letter to say this is the situation in South Sudan. And every year, I'm accountable to the SG on preventing sexual exploitation and abuse. We are strengthening the processes. It's not perfect. It's very imperfect because we don't have it across the country in every single state. We don't have the complete mechanism in every county or in every community, but we are working on it to strengthen it. But when the cases come to us, they're taken very, very seriously. In terms of the issue of workplace harassment, that goes beyond the UN, is for every private sector organization, is for government, is everywhere. Women should be able to come into the workplace free of harassment. That's for every woman. From the highest ranking woman in this country, the VP and the First Lady, all the way to myself, to women across government, to women in offices, to women who are directors, women who are office managers, women who are project officers, women who are secretaries, women who are assistants, women who are even driving, because we have female drivers in the UN. Women who are in any workplace should not be harassed to carry out their duties. It is unacceptable. And for men who are doing it, we're calling on you to please desist. Please give women the chance to produce and contribute to the development of this nation. I would like to also then, and I'm going to be giving some closing points that I think are very important, and thank you for the point you made to me in relation to roads. In Bor, I was very proud to see some work that happened. Very creative. And I want to thank one of our agencies, IOM, that's been working very strongly with the Jonglei government, in particularly the climate disaster flood management committee. I went to see the work that they're doing. And what they've done is they've created a dual purpose dike. Yep. So it's a dike to prevent flooding, and it's a road at the same time to connect two towns. I was so impressed. And the issue of roads, critical, because many places I go to, I can't go by road. I have to fly in to that particular place, and the logistics to get there is very difficult. Imagine now the average South Sudanese who needs to access services, needs to access markets. And I talk about the issue of the fact that from PG County, from PG County, Canal Town, that whole area, to get to the Malakal market, they have to go by canoe. When I was going up, there were about 3 or 4 canoes that passed me, more than that, but there were 3 or 4 I took attention of. I was taking pictures. That passed me going down the other direction. And unfortunately, one of those canoes that passed me got into distress. And one of the boats in my convoy had to go back to rescue that canoe. Because of no access to roads, it takes them a day to paddle down the Nile to take their goods to market. They take the fire coal, they take the fish. I saw all of it for myself by canoe, and it takes 1 day. Imagine a whole day taking fish, taking fire coal, and you cannot even take enough in terms of the amount you need for substantial trade. So roads are critical because it provides access to services, access to markets, access to other communities. It helps with social cohesion as well. And so definitely, for sure, the prioritization of roads in this country is important. I want to close with one point on the role of humanitarian workers and the humanitarian community. Humanitarians come into countries to save lives. They do not come in to develop the private sector. They do not come in to create jobs. They do not come in to build factories. They do not come in to strengthen the private sector. Humanitarians come in to save lives, keep people alive so that other actors can play their part, the development actors. Very important for people to understand. Humanitarians in this country are only here to save lives. And so depending on humanitarians to develop South Sudan, you're depending on a broken stick. In fact, the stick doesn't even exist. So if you're looking to humanitarians to create jobs, then it means you've misunderstood how nation building is done, how state building is done. The private sector and the government are responsible. And the government is responsible to create an enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. The government is responsible to create an enabling environment for foreign direct investment. And it's in the private sector with foreign direct investments and with government's leadership that jobs will be created. It's very important. What we do on the development side, we are doing skills building of youth across this country. We're doing job fairs trying to link the private sector with the youth who need the jobs. And we're doing that, supporting government under the leadership of those who are responsible. And I thank Mama Rebecca, who's been leading on this with Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Youth, with support of UNDP and others. These are the things we do on the development side. But humanitarians are only here to save lives, provide health services, provide immediate needs, while others play their part. I want to thank the media today for your very constructive engagement. I want to thank you for the excellent questions you've asked me. I want to thank you for the platform you have provided. And every time I go to the field, I go with the media, and maybe what I need to do is extend beyond our own media, is also to invite other media houses to join me on some of my trips. I will be going to ABA in 2 more weeks. I'm always going somewhere. And so I would depend on my colleagues to maybe invite some of you to join me on some of my trips, so you get to see other parts of the country and get to hear directly from the women, the children, the youth, the men, and the boys and girls of this fine nation in terms of what they expect, in terms of their hopes and dreams for this young republic called South Sudan. Thank you very much.